Have you ever wondered who's really behind the wheel when you slide into that back seat at 2 a.m.? What if the 5-star rating staring back at you from your phone screen was hiding something far more sinister than a dirty car or awkward conversation? What happens when the person you trust to get you home safely has other plans for your destination? Sarah Chen had asked herself none of these questions when she requested her ride that frigid November night in Portland. She was a creature of habit, a 28-year-old marketing analyst who had taken hundreds of Uber rides without incident. The app was as routine to her as brushing her teeth. Open, request, wait, ride, rate, repeat. It was the mundane liturgy of modern urban life, a ritual so normalized that the possibility of danger had been algorithmed away into statistical improbability. But statistics mean nothing when you become the outlier. The office happy hour had run later than Sarah intended. Her coworkers had finally convinced her to stay for just one more round, which had predictably multiplied into 4. By the time she checked her phone, it was 1:47 a.m., and the light rain that had been threatening all evening had evolved into a steady downpour. The streets of downtown Portland glistened with that particular urban darkness that comes when rain transforms streetlights into blurred halos of amber and red. Sarah stood under the narrow awning of the bar, watching the puddles form tiny rivers along the curb. Her thumb moved automatically through the familiar motions. Open app, confirm pickup location, watch the little car icon navigate toward her position. Driver name, Marcus. Vehicle, gray Honda Accord. License plate, BDK 7392. ETA, 3 minutes. Rating, 4.96 stars with over 2,000 rides completed. Perfect, she thought. She'd be home in 20 minutes, in her pajamas in 25, asleep by 2:30. The gray Honda pulled up exactly on time, its headlights cutting through the rain like searchlights. Sarah made the perfunctory check of the license plate against her screen, saw the match, and made a dash for the rear passenger door. She was inside and clicking her seatbelt before she'd really looked at the driver, concerned more with escaping the rain than with the face in the rearview mirror. "Sarah?" The voice was deep, textured with the kind of rasp that suggested either years of smoking or a perpetual cold. "That's me," she confirmed, already distracted by her phone, pulling up Instagram to mindlessly scroll through her feed. "Heading to Northwest 23rd and Lovejoy?" "Yep." The car pulled away from the curb with practiced smoothness. Sarah barely noticed. She was deep into a post from her friend's vacation in Mexico, double-tapping photos of pristine beaches and blue water that seemed to exist in another universe from the cold, wet Portland night surrounding her. It wasn't until they'd been driving for about 5 minutes that Sarah realized something was off. She had taken this route home countless times. They should have turned left on Burnside, but instead, the driver had continued straight. She looked up from her phone, suddenly alert. "Excuse me, I think you missed the turn," she said, her voice carrying that particular pitch of someone trying to be polite while correcting a mistake. "There's construction on Burnside tonight," Marcus replied without turning around. "This route is actually faster. The app rerouted me." Sarah glanced at her phone. The map did show them on an alternate route, a blue line threading through streets she didn't immediately recognize. But the ETA had only increased by 2 minutes. She relaxed slightly. It wasn't uncommon for the app to adjust routes based on real-time traffic data. "Okay," she said, but something in her voice betrayed her uncertainty. They drove in silence for another few minutes. The streets had become less familiar, the buildings more industrial, the streetlights more sparse. Sarah found herself paying attention now, watching the route on her phone with increasing focus. The blue line seemed to be taking them in the right general direction, but through a part of Portland she'd never been to before. "How long have you been driving for Uber?" she asked, partly out of genuine curiosity, partly to fill the growing silence. "Long enough," Marcus said. His eyes met hers in the rearview mirror, and Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. There was something in his gaze, something that made her look away immediately. "That's good," she said lamely, returning her attention to her phone. She pulled up her text messages and opened her conversation with her roommate, Jen. "In an Uber, home soon," she typed quickly, then paused. Some instinct made her add, "Driver seemed nice, gray Honda Accord, license BDK 7392. She hit send, then immediately felt foolish. She was being paranoid. This was Portland, not some horror movie. Marcus was probably a perfectly nice person who was just tired from a long night of driving. The weird route was explained by construction. Everything was fine, except everything wasn't fine. The car turned onto a street that had no streetlights at all. The headlights illuminated a narrow road flanked by warehouses, their windows dark and vacant. Sarah's phone showed they were still following the designated route, but the ETA had now jumped to 15 minutes remaining. They were moving away from her apartment, not toward it. "Where are we going?" Sarah asked, and this time there was no politeness in her voice, only poorly concealed alarm. "I told you, there's construction. This route will loop back around," Marcus said calmly. "Stop the car. I want to get out. We're on a narrow industrial road. There's nowhere safe to stop." Sarah's hands were shaking now. She looked at her phone again, at the map that showed them in an area labeled Rivergate Industrial District, miles from her apartment. The blue line of their route had disappeared entirely. In its place was a small spinning wheel, indicating the app was trying to recalculate. "I said stop the car." Sarah's voice rose to a near shout. Marcus didn't respond. Instead, he accelerated. Sarah's mind raced through her options with desperate speed. She could unlock the door and roll out, but they were going at least 40 miles per hour now and the road was slick with rain. She could call 911, but what would she say? That her Uber driver was taking a weird route? That she had a bad feeling? She grabbed the door handle anyway, testing it. Locked. Child safety locks engaged from the driver's controls. "Please," she said, her voice breaking. "Please just let me out. I'll give you 5 stars. I won't report this. Just please stop the car." Marcus finally spoke again, and his voice had changed. The professional driver facade had cracked, revealing something else underneath. Something that made Sarah's blood freeze. "Do you know what it's like, Sarah? To drive people like you around night after night? You barely look at us, you don't say hello, you stare at your phones and treat us like we're part of the car, like we're not even human. Just a service, just an app." His voice was rising now, becoming more animated. "Well, I'm going to make sure you remember this ride, Sarah. I'm going to make sure you remember me." Sarah's phone was in her hand, shaking violently. She managed to open the dial pad and hit 911, but before she could press the call button, the car suddenly swerved violently. Sarah was thrown against the door, her phone flying from her hand and disappearing into the darkness of the footwell. "Don't even think about it," Marcus snarled. The car had slowed now, turning onto an even narrower road that seemed to lead nowhere. In the distance, Sarah could see the faint lights of what might have been a warehouse. But there were no other cars, no other people, nothing but rain and darkness, and the growing certainty that she was going to die tonight. Her mind flashed through everything she'd ever read about surviving abductions. Fight back, make noise, leave evidence. She slipped her hand into her jacket pocket and felt her keys there. Not much of a weapon, but something. She also felt the small canister of pepper spray her mother had given her years ago, which she'd carried faithfully but never imagined using. The car pulled to a stop behind a dark building. Marcus put it in park but left the engine running. Sarah's heart was hammering so hard she thought it might burst through her chest. This was it. This was the moment that would determine whether she lived or died. Marcus turned around in his seat to face her for the first time. In the dim light from the dashboard, Sarah could see him clearly now. He was younger than his voice had suggested, maybe mid-30s with a thin face and eyes that seemed both vacant and intensely focused at the same time. But it was his smile that would haunt her later, assuming there would be a later. It was the smile of someone who had done this before. "Here's what's going to happen," Marcus began, but Sarah never let him finish. She had been slowly working her pepper spray out of her pocket, holding it low where he couldn't see. The moment he turned around, she raised it and sprayed directly into his face. Marcus screamed, his hands flying to his eyes. Sarah didn't hesitate. She threw her weight against the door, and though it was locked, she pressed the manual unlock button near the armrest. The door flew open and she tumbled out into the rain. She hit the pavement hard, scraping her hands and knees, but adrenaline drove her to her feet instantly. She could hear Marcus still screaming in the car, fumbling with his door. Sarah ran. She had no idea where she was or where she was running to, but she ran like her life depended on it, because it did. The industrial area was a maze of dark buildings and narrow alleys. Sarah's lungs burned and her legs felt like they were moving through water. But she kept running. She could hear footsteps behind her. Marcus's voice calling out, distorted by rage and pain. "You bitch! You're dead! Do you hear me? You're dead!" Sarah ducked behind a dumpster, pressing herself into the shadows, trying to control her ragged breathing. She could hear Marcus getting closer, his footsteps slapping against the wet pavement. He was cursing, promising elaborate violence. Sarah held her breath as he passed within 10 feet of her hiding spot, so close she could have reached out and touched him. For what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, Sarah remained frozen behind the dumpster, listening to Marcus search for her. Eventually, his voice grew more distant. Sarah waited until she couldn't hear him at all before she dared to move. She crept out from behind the dumpster and tried to orient herself. In the distance, she could see the glow of what might be a main road. She moved toward it, staying in the shadows, jumping at every sound. Her phone was gone, left in Marcus's car, but she had her keys and her pepper spray, now half empty. She had never felt so vulnerable in her life. It took 20 minutes of terrified navigation through the industrial district before Sarah finally reached a lit street. She had never been so grateful to see a 7-Eleven in her life. She practically fell through the door, startling the clerk behind the counter. "Please," she gasped. "Please, I need to call the police. I was attacked. My Uber driver tried to—" Her voice broke, and suddenly she was sobbing, the adrenaline that had kept her going finally draining away, leaving only terror and exhaustion. The clerk, a young man who couldn't have been more than 20, immediately came around the counter. Okay, it's all right. You're safe now. I'm calling the police right now." The police arrived within minutes, and Sarah told them everything. The ride request, the wrong route, the child locks, Marcus's threats, her escape. They listened carefully, taking notes, asking questions. They were kind and professional, but Sarah could see something in their eyes that made her stomach twist. This wasn't the first time they'd heard a story like this. Detective Maria Gonzalez arrived about an hour later. She was a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She sat down across from Sarah in the back of the ambulance where the paramedics were treating her scraped hands and knees. "Sarah, I need you to tell me everything again, from the beginning. Every detail you can remember," Detective Gonzalez said. Sarah repeated her story, this time including even more details. The exact time she'd requested the ride, the license plate number she'd checked, Marcus's profile rating, every word he'd said, every turn he'd taken. Detective Gonzalez listened intently, occasionally making notes. When Sarah finished, the detective was quiet for a moment before speaking. "Sarah, I want you to know that you did everything right. You were aware of your surroundings, you documented information about your driver, you texted your roommate, and when the situation turned dangerous, you fought back effectively. You're alive because you were smart and brave." "But," Sarah said, sensing there was more. Detective Gonzalez sighed. "But I need to tell you something. We're going to investigate this thoroughly, but there's a complication. We can't find any record of a driver named Marcus with that license plate in Uber's system." Sarah felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. "What? But I saw it in my app. I checked the license plate. It matched." "I believe you," Detective Gonzalez said. "But when we contacted Uber, they have no record of your ride request after 1:47 a.m. The last ride they show for you was 3 days ago." "That's impossible." I opened the app. I saw his profile, his rating, his car information. "I know, and we're going to figure out what happened." But Sarah, I think you need to understand what you encountered tonight. Someone has figured out how to spoof the Uber app. They're somehow intercepting ride requests or creating false profiles that look legitimate. You're not the first person this has happened to. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. What do you mean I'm not the first? Detective Gonzalez pulled out her phone and showed Sarah a series of photos. Young women all around Sarah's age, all smiling in what looked like driver's license photos or social media profile pictures. These women all reported similar experiences over the past 6 months. Different drivers, different locations, but the same MO. Fake Uber profiles, child safety locks, remote industrial areas. They all managed to escape like you did. But 2 weeks ago, we found a woman's body in the Willamette River. Her last known activity was requesting an Uber ride. Sarah thought she might vomit. Oh my God. We've been working with Uber's security team, but whoever is doing this is sophisticated. They're not just tech savvy. They understand the vulnerabilities in the system and in human psychology. People trust the app. They see the 5-star rating, the profile photo, the license plate that matches, and they get in the car. By the time they realize something is wrong, it's too late. But how is it possible? How can someone fake all of that? That's what we're trying to figure out. Our tech forensics team believes it involves some kind of man-in-the-middle attack, where someone intercepts the communication between your phone and Uber's servers. They can essentially create a shadow app that looks identical to the real thing, but feeds you false information. When you checked that license plate, you were seeing what they wanted you to see. Sarah's mind was reeling. So when I was looking at my phone thinking I was following the route, that was fake too? Possibly. Or the route was real, but programmed by the attacker. Either way, you were never in an actual Uber. You were in someone's personal vehicle that had been made to look like it matched your ride. What about the gray Honda Accord? Was that real? We're checking traffic cameras now, but here's the thing. Gray Honda Accords are one of the most common vehicles in Portland. Whoever is doing this knows that. They're choosing cars that blend in, that wouldn't raise any red flags. Sarah sat in silence for a moment, processing all of this. Then something occurred to her. You said other women escaped. How? What did they do? Different things. One jumped from the car while it was still moving, broke her leg but survived. Another managed to break a window. You used pepper spray, which was incredibly smart. But Sarah, the woman we found in the river, we believe she didn't have the opportunity to fight back. We think he's evolving, learning from his mistakes. The implications of that were horrifying. So, he's going to try again. Yes, and that's why we need your help. You saw his face, you heard his voice. You can work with our sketch artist to create a composite. Every detail you remember could be the thing that helps us catch him. Of course, I'll do whatever I can. There's something else. Your phone. It's in his car, and if we can track it, we might be able to find him. Sarah's eyes widened. My phone! I have Find My Phone enabled. Detective Gonzalez immediately pulled out her laptop. Give me your Apple ID information. Sarah provided her login credentials, and within minutes they were looking at a map showing her phone's location. It was moving, heading north on I-5. He's running, Detective Gonzalez said, immediately radioing for backup. All units, we have a location on a suspect vehicle heading northbound on I-5, approaching the Columbia River. Suspect is armed and dangerous, wanted in connection with multiple attempted abductions and 1 homicide. Vehicle is a gray Honda Accord, license plate BDK 7392. The next few hours passed in a blur. Sarah was taken to the police station, where she spent hours with a sketch artist, recreating Marcus's face with painstaking detail. Every feature, every distinctive characteristic, the exact shade of his eyes, the shape of his nose, the thin lips that had formed that terrible smile. Around dawn, Detective Gonzalez returned with news. We got him. Sarah felt her knees go weak with relief. You did? How? Your phone led us right to him. Oregon State Police set up a roadblock near the Washington border. He tried to run, but they cornered him. He's in custody now. And the car? Did you find everything? The car, your phone, and evidence linking him to at least 6 other cases. Sarah, you helped us catch a serial predator. If you hadn't fought back, if you hadn't escaped, we might never have gotten this close to him." But there was something in Detective Gonzalez's expression that made Sarah pause. "What is it? What aren't you telling me?" The detective hesitated before responding. "When we arrested him, he was laughing. He said, 'You got me, but you can't stop all of us. There are more. We share techniques, we share information. You think I'm the only one who figured out how to do this? We're working with federal authorities now to investigate whether there's some kind of network. People sharing exploit techniques, specifically for targeting rideshare passengers." Sarah felt sick all over again. The idea that this wasn't just one psychopath but potentially many, coordinating with each other, learning from each other, was beyond horrifying. "What do I do now?" Sarah asked quietly. "How do I ever trust getting in a car again?" Detective Gonzalez sat down beside her. "I can't tell you that you should feel safe, because the truth is, there are real threats out there. But I can tell you what you can do to protect yourself. Always check the license plate against what's in the app, but also check the app version number and make sure your software is updated. Enable two-factor authentication. Share your trip with a friend in real time. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And carry pepper spray like you did. It saved your life." "What about Uber? What are they doing about this?" "They're implementing additional security measures, but the reality is that any system can be hacked if someone is determined and skilled enough. The best security is your own awareness and willingness to act when something feels wrong. Too many people ignore their instincts because they don't want to seem rude or paranoid. You didn't ignore yours, and that's why you're alive." Sarah spent the next several weeks working with police, providing testimony, identifying evidence, and learning more than she ever wanted to know about the dark side of the gig economy. Marcus, whose real name turned out to be David Brennan, was charged with kidnapping, assault, attempted murder, and 1 count of homicide. The investigation revealed he had been researching security vulnerabilities in rideshare apps for over a year, practicing his techniques on what he called test runs, where he would intercept rides but ultimately complete them without incident, building his confidence and refining his method. But Detective Gonzalez's words kept echoing in Sarah's mind. There are more. The investigation had uncovered online forums where people discussed rideshare security flaws, not to fix them but to exploit them. Some were merely theoretical discussions, but others were more sinister, sharing actual code and techniques. The FBI had taken over that portion of the investigation, but Sarah knew it would be a long battle. 6 months after her attack, Sarah finally felt ready to share her story publicly. She worked with a victims advocacy group to produce a video detailing what happened to her and providing specific safety tips for rideshare passengers. The video went viral, garnering millions of views and sparking a national conversation about rideshare safety. Sarah also started taking self-defense classes and became certified in personal safety training. She began speaking at colleges and community centers, teaching others, especially women, how to stay safe and what to do if they found themselves in a dangerous situation. Every person she taught was someone who might one day need that information, someone who might escape because of something Sarah had shared. She still used rideshare apps, but she did so with heightened awareness. She checked every detail, shared every trip, and never ever ignored that voice in her head that said something was wrong. She had learned that the line between a normal Tuesday night and a fight for your life could be as thin as swiping your thumb across a screen. The trial of David Brennan took place a year after Sarah's attack. She testified for 3 hours, recounting every detail of that night, facing down the man who had tried to kill her. When she finished, she walked out of that courtroom with her head high, knowing she had done everything she could to make sure he would never hurt anyone else. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before finding him guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As the bailiff led him away, Brennan turned and looked directly at Sarah. She met his gaze and didn't look away. She had survived him. She had stopped him. And she would spend the rest of her life making sure others knew how to do the same. But Sarah also knew that Brennan had been telling the truth about one thing. He wasn't the only one. There were more people out there, learning from his techniques, finding new vulnerabilities to exploit. The convenience of modern technology had created new opportunities for predators, and the systems designed to keep people safe were only as strong as their weakest link. The rideshare companies implemented new security measures after Sarah's case gained national attention. Enhanced driver verification, better GPS tracking, panic buttons in the app, and random security checks. But Sarah knew that security was always a race between those trying to protect and those trying to exploit. For every new measure implemented, someone somewhere was figuring out how to get around it. What troubled Sarah most were the statistics she learned during her advocacy work. Reports of assaults, harassment, and attacks related to rideshare services were increasing every year. Most went unreported, victims too scared or too ashamed to come forward. The companies maintained that their platforms were safe, pointing to millions of successful rides completed daily. And that was true. The vast majority of rides were perfectly safe. But for the people like Sarah, the ones who encountered that tiny percentage of danger, those statistics meant nothing. She thought often about the woman whose body had been found in the river, the one who hadn't escaped. Detective Gonzalez had told Sarah her name eventually. Jennifer Martinez, 26 years old, a graduate student at Portland State University. She had been walking home from the library at night, got scared when she saw a group of men on the street and requested a ride. It should have been the safe choice. It should have saved her life. Instead, it ended it. Sarah visited Jennifer's grave once, bringing flowers and a handwritten note apologizing for surviving when Jennifer hadn't. It was irrational, she knew, but the guilt haunted her. Why had she been able to fight back when Jennifer couldn't? What had been different? Was it just luck? Circumstance? The fact that Sarah happened to have pepper spray in her pocket that night? These questions followed Sarah everywhere, informing her advocacy work, driving her to share her story over and over again, even when it was painful, even when it brought back memories of those terrifying minutes in the back of that car. If telling her story saved even one person, it was worth it. 3 years after the attack, Sarah received a message through her advocacy website. It was from a young woman named Emma, who had been getting into an Uber when she noticed the license plate didn't match the app, not by much, just one digit different. She had thought about just getting in anyway, not wanting to be rude or difficult, but then she remembered Sarah's story, remembered the video about checking every detail, and she had walked away. The driver had gotten angry, had driven away cursing at her. 2 weeks later, Emma saw his photo in the news. He had been arrested for assaulting another passenger, one who had gotten into the car despite a different kind of discrepancy she'd noticed but ignored. Emma's message ended with, "You saved my life without knowing it. Thank you for being brave enough to share your story. Thank you for making me paranoid enough to trust my instincts." Sarah cried when she read it. This was why she kept going. This was why she spoke at conferences and schools and community centers until her voice was hoarse. This was why she relived the worst night of her life over and over again in interviews and testimonies and advocacy campaigns. Because somewhere out there, someone like Emma was alive because Sarah had refused to be silent. But the work was never done. As long as there were systems to exploit, there would be people willing to exploit them. As long as there were moments of vulnerability, there would be predators waiting for them. Sarah's role wasn't to solve the problem. It was too big, too systemic, too rooted in the very structure of modern urban life. Her role was to educate, to empower, to make people aware that the convenience they took for granted could be weaponized against them. She never wanted people to be afraid. Fear without knowledge was paralyzing, but awareness combined with preparation was powerful. That was the message Sarah carried forward. Be aware. Be prepared. Trust your instincts. Check every detail. Share your location. Have a weapon. Know your exits. Don't be polite at the expense of your safety. And most importantly, if something feels wrong, it probably is. Sarah's life had been irrevocably changed by those 15 minutes in the back of a fake Uber. She had nightmares for years, developed anxiety about getting into cars, went through extensive therapy to process the trauma. But she had also discovered a strength she didn't know she possessed, a purpose that gave meaning to her survival. She sometimes wondered what would have happened if she had ignored her instincts that night, if she had stayed on her phone instead of paying attention, if she hadn't had pepper spray, if she had been too scared to fight back. The possible outcomes haunted her, but they also motivated her. Every time she felt tired, every time she wondered if her advocacy was making any difference, she thought about Jennifer Martinez and Emma and all the others whose names she would never know, the ones who had listened to her message and acted on it, the ones who were alive because someone had finally told them the truth. The world could be dangerous, and blind trust in technology wouldn't keep them safe. Only awareness would. Only preparation would. Only the willingness to be rude, to be difficult, to make a scene, to fight back, to run, to survive. That was Sarah's legacy. Not as a victim, but as a survivor. Not as someone who had been broken, but as someone who had been tested and had emerged stronger. The worst 15 minutes of her life had become the defining chapter of her story. Not an ending, but a beginning. And every time someone heard her story and took an action that kept them safe, every time someone checked a license plate or shared their location or trusted their instincts, Sarah's survival meant something more. It rippled outward, creating waves of awareness, of caution, of preparedness. One person at a time, one story at a time, one life saved at a time. Because that's how you fight back against the darkness that lurks in the ordinary moments of modern life. Not with fear, but with knowledge. Not with paranoia, but with preparedness. Not by becoming a victim, but by refusing to be one. Sarah Chen had gotten into a car 3 years ago thinking it was just another ride home. Instead, she had gotten into a nightmare. But she had gotten out of it alive, and she had spent every day since making sure others knew how to do the same. The rideshare app on her phone was still there, still used occasionally when necessary. But she used it differently now. With eyes open, with senses alert, with the knowledge that sometimes the greatest danger looks exactly like convenience, sounds exactly like a friendly voice, and wears the mask of a 5-star rating. The question Sarah had asked at the beginning, what if the person you trust to get you home safely has other plans for your destination, was no longer theoretical. She had lived it. She had survived it. And she had dedicated her life to making sure that when others asked themselves that question, they would know exactly what to do. Trust, but verify. Hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. And never, ever ignore that voice inside that says something is wrong. Because that voice, that instinct, that moment of awareness could be the only thing standing between a safe arrival home and a nightmare that changes everything. Sarah knew that better than anyone. And now, so do you. If you found this story impactful, if it made you think about your own safety habits, or if you have your own story to share, I want to hear from you. Hit that subscribe button to stay updated on more true stories that could save your life. Drop a comment below about what safety measures you take when using rideshare apps, or share this with someone who needs to hear it. Your awareness, your story, your comment could be the thing that keeps someone safe tonight. Don't just scroll past, subscribe, comment, and share. Your engagement could literally save a life.